And I'm going to stay in suspense since you are still on mute. Hello?
Sorry about that. I love talking to myself, So I find these shows go a lot better if I just stay on mute.
Support for Trifles comes from listeners like you, who support us through Patreon and Substack. Bonus material, thank you gifts, and more await at patreon.com/trifles and at trifles.substack.com. And now you can enjoy some Trifles swag, mugs, notepads, and oval stickers. Available in our store. Find it at ihearofsherlock.com/merchandise.
Welcome to Trifles, a weekly podcast about the Sherlock Holmes stories.
It is, of course, a trifle, but there is nothing so important as trifles.
Yes, the thumb was engineered, the foot was deviled, and the Peter was black, but there are so many other details to pick apart in the stories.
Pray, be precise as to details.
You know the plots, but what about the minutiae? Have you ever stopped to wonder what a basket chair is? Or why Watson's medicine of choice is always brandy? Or what a coal scuttle is and why cigars would be there?
You are very inquisitive, Mr. Holmes.
It is my business to know what other people don't know.
Scott Monty and Burt Wolder will have the answers to these questions and more in Trifles.
The game's afoot.
Episode 485, The Three Real Garridebs. Hello there, and welcome to Trifles, the podcast where we get into the minutiae in the Sherlock Holmes stories. I'm Scott Monty.
I'm Burt Wolder.
And will the real Burt Wolder please stand up?
My name is Burt Wolder. No, my name is Burt Wolder. No, my name is Burt Wolder.
I don't believe any of you because you're all sitting down.
Well, panel, put on your blindfolds and put in your earplugs and read along with me as I tell you about the life of Burt Wolder.
Mostly earplugs, yes.
The end.
Well, we are here with you once again with one of our Mr. Sherlock Holmes the Theorist episodes. That's an episode where we take a look at a piece of old Sherlockian scholarship, and we bring it forth once again. It could be in a place where it is not readily available to you. Could be a classic piece that deserves wider distribution. But the point is, there are plenty of Sherlockian scholars and pseudo-scholars that have gone before and have discovered various trifling things in the Sherlock Holmes stories. And in this case, we want to bring to your attention something from 1987, that wonderful centenary year, celebrating 100 years since Sherlock Holmes made his public appearance. It comes from Baker Street Miscellanea, and it has to do with linking the three Garridebs with, well, we'll keep you in suspense. Because just after we share this bit of information, we'll get right into it. Wanted to remind you that the show is available across all podcasting platforms. So whether you're on an Apple device or a Google device, and that is an Android device, you can listen to us on whatever podcast platform you choose. You could even listen to us on the smart speaker, maybe on your bedside table or in your kitchen. We exist everywhere. Local and good quality podcasts are sold. You can find us at pod.link/trifles. We also have a link in the show notes. It'll take you to all of those different platforms. And of course, if you support us on Patreon or on Substack, that means you are helping us to continue this fine tradition that is now 10 seasons deep. We do appreciate your support. Again, show notes have the links to Substack and Patreon for your generous support. And if you have anything that you'd like to share with us, any ideas for future episodes, simply email us at trifles@ihearofsherlock.com. That's trifles@ihearofsherlock.com. Well, we find ourselves in the summer 1987 issue, that's number 50, of Baker Street Miscellanea. And Bert, I'm going to let you tee this up because you're the one who unearthed this little gem.
Well, this is one of the finds you can make when you go through the Baker Street Miscellanea. And the Baker Street Miscellanea was a publication that ran, we've talked about this before, but I don't remember. Was it about 20 years that the Baker Street Miscellanea was being published?
I think that's about right. 76 through 94, maybe? 18 years.
Yeah, there you go. And this is an essay by the Reverend Raymond L. Holly of Frankfort, Illinois. And he was, as the Baker Street Miscellanea will tell you, a moving force in the occupants of the empty house, Scion. And this is really something quite special in the world of Sherlockian scholarship because there isn't much that does what Raymond Holly does here, which is find linkages to people that you would not expect and put forth a pretty interesting argument about that. So the title of this is The Real Three Garridebs. And the Reverend Raymond Holly begins by pointing out that the final problem appeared in the Strand magazine in December 1893, and another home story was not to appear until August of 1901, when The Hound of the Baskervilles began. However, just 1 year later, from 1893, in December 1894, the first of the stories of Brigadier Gerard appeared. And these appeared off and on for the next 15 years. How Dr. Conan Doyle, who was also the literary agent for Dr. Watson, got the stories of Brigadier Gerard, we are not told. They seem to have been written from conversations in a cafe in the 1840s and the early 1850s.
You do have to pay attention for eavesdroppers in mid-1800s cafes. They're everywhere. But Reverend Holly tells us that Etienne Gerard was born in 1782 of a respectable Gascon family, one without wealth or social standing, and he entered the army in 1798 at the age of 16. And then by the time of his first recorded adventure in 1806, he was a lieutenant, or lieutenant, as the British would have called him. By 1808, he was promoted to captain, senior captain in 1809. No records of him becoming a major, but he became a colonel in 1812, and in 1813, brigadier. And the brigadier is the senior colonel of the 2 or 3 in a brigade, second in command to the general of the brigade. So Brigadier Gerard had quite a few amorous adventures during his career, and he hints at some of these. And of course, as a result of these non-military liaisons, unknown to him, a son was born. And Holly says, I assume the son was not born of this one actual marriage, since his wife seems to have been one of the great many women in 14 separate kingdoms. However, from the subsequent history, the evidence would indicate that she came from a fairly well-to-do family. And Brigadier Gerard says it's a family whose name, decades later, I will not mention. She gave him a heavy gold ring, which once endangered his life in Saragossa during the Peninsular War. Might indicate she had some wealth. If she's the mother of the boy, if she is the mother, the boy was born in 1809. And another likely candidate is Lucia from the senatorial family of Venice, whose grandfather had been Doge. And she retired, moved to a convent after the French left Venice in 1814. If she was the mother, the boy would have been born in late 1807. In either case, the family apparently had resources to give him a fairly good education. And that meant he wouldn't have had to undertake a trade. They would not, however, acknowledge him as a legitimate member of the family, but they did not keep him from the knowledge of his parentage.
We should just point out to our listeners what's going on here. If you haven't read the stories of Brigadier Gerard, this is one of the things that Conan Doyle's many areas of fascination was with the Napoleonic Wars and with the military and the bravery of some of these combatants. And he invented Brigadier Gerard. And some of the stories are really very, very funny. But the exploits of Brigadier Gerard are really worth reading. It's completely different from the world of Sherlock Holmes. But what Reverend Holly is doing here is he has looked into the Gerard story, and he's found out that based on what the Brigadier tells us about his glorious career, he had a son. And this is how we start on the path towards making a connection here to Sherlock Holmes. So the Battle of Waterloo, and again, this is the Napoleonic age, on June 18, 1815, brings Brigadier Gerard's career to an end, but his reputation goes on with several other of the more distinguished, in his modest words, and younger Napoleonic officers. He frequented the sign of the great man in the Rue Varin, where, in 1821, Capitaine Fourneau, late of the Emperor's navy, recruited him for his last service to the Emperor. The son, whose mother we can only guess at, grew up possibly in England, knowing before he was grown who his father was, and perhaps even hearing from other sources of the old soldier who dreamed of the great days. His feelings towards his father were probably ambivalent. Proud, because of the Brigadier's reputation for bravery. Resentful, because of the parentage being unacknowledged. And this last would be a little mitigated by the fact that the Brigadier did not know of his son. The boy, although he had some income or capital sufficient for his needs, was not an acknowledged member of his mother's family either. He needed a name. He wanted a name that would point for someone who could see it to his father, as any family name should, but he also wanted to conceal it. He could not simply adopt the name Gerard, but neither could he neglect it. Likewise, he wanted to point to the particular Gerard, who was his father.
And that person was known by the title he held at the end of his service, and that he is still known today, Brigadier Gerard. If the son added B to stand for bis, or second, as it does in the famous address of 221B, then you get an interesting expression, Brigadier Gerard B. It's interesting because it has 6 letters 2 times each, and 1 letter 4 times, and no letter is hapax legomenon. Taking the consonants in the order in which they appear in the latter part of the expression, Gerard B, gave him the skeleton of his surname. All right, so Gerard B. This is going to require a little bit of mental sketching here. We take the vowels out of Gerard B, and what are we left with? G, R, R, D, B. Each letter in this represented 2 letters in the original expression. All he must do now to complete a surname was take the vowels A, E, and I, each of which appears twice in the original expression, Brigadier Gerard, and use each once in the name. And he had a double anagram of Brigadier Gerard B in the name Garridebs. In which the letter in the latter expression stood for 2 in the original one. It also had the merit of not pointing to any particular national origin. And those who are old enough may remember a writer just before the Second World War who adopted the pen name of Jean Valjean because it did not point to any nationality in particular. I suppose that the brigadier's son adopted the name of Garrideb by at least 1825 or so.
Mr. Garrideb may have had sufficient wealth from his mother to live as a gentleman. He may have had to go into business. If so, he did well enough at it that later his son was able to live as a gentleman with a universality of interests, possessing the nucleus of a national collection. So now, listeners, we are on to Brigadier Gerard's grandson. Well, around 1840, Mr. Garrideb, the brigadier's son, had a son whom he named Nathan. The original Nathan was the prophet who went to King David after what Sherlock Holmes once called the small affair of Uriah and Bathsheba, and said, "Thou art the man," 2 Samuel 12:7. The senior Garrideb may have had some few chuckles as he thought of the name of his son pointing to the old soldier. The late 50s was rather older in age for a person before the middle of the last century than it is now. In Gascony, "Thou art the man, Brigadier Gerard."
You the man. That's good. Well, when Nathan Garrideb was in his teens, 3 events took place which have concern for him, although none did at the time. On April 5th, 1854, Sherlock Holmes was born at Mycroft. And, of course, recall that this is a supposition on Reverend Holly's parts. April 5th, that's an interesting choice for Holmes's birthday. But Mycroft, this was perhaps an echo of the town that I think it was Baring Gould picked in his biography of Sherlock Holmes, the town of Mycroft in Yorkshire. Anyway, he continues. Later in the same year, his grandfather, Brigadier Gerard, died in Gascony. And in 1858, in Chicago, James Winter, later to be known by the surname of Moorcroft and also as Killer Evans, was born. He would only one day falsely assume the name of John Garrideb. Now, Nathan had a brother who was dead by 1902. He had women relations, perhaps some with the same surname, either sisters or nieces, but with him, the continuity of the family name died out. There were but 3 male Garridebs, the son of Brigadier Gerard, his son Nathan, and the third, who was the former's older son and the latter's brother. So, in 1902, on June 26th and 27th, that's where we have the events recorded from the adventure of the 3 Garridebs. Watson describes Nathan Garrideb as very tall, loose-jointed, round-backed, gaunt, bald, some 60 years of age, with a cadaverous face and the dull, dead skin of a man to whom exercise was unknown. Large, round spectacles and a small, projecting goat's beard combine this with his stooping attitude to give him an expression of peering curiosity, with a general effect of eccentric amiability. Aside from his height, he was not at all like his grandfather, but of course neither he nor his father had been raised to be like his grandfather.
So in October 1924, The Adventure of the 3 Garridebs was published in Collier's in the United States. Publication in the Strand in England was the following January. Dr. Watson tells us that Nathan Garrideb never got over the shock of his dissipated dreams. Perhaps in this way he was like his grandfather, and that he was last heard of at a nursing home in Brixton. Watson does not record that Sherlock Holmes questioned Nathan Garrideb about where his family was from. This seems, under the circumstances, a most glaring omission. Would not Nathan Garrideb, interested as he was in Heidelberg, Neanderthal, and Cro-Magnon man, have been ready to expound on the origin of Garrideb man? I suspect that the omission is Watson's in recording rather than of Holmes in asking, unless, indeed, Holmes already knew the background of Nathan Garrideb. By the time he wrote the story in 1924, Dr. Watson may very well have known. The Adventures of Brigadier Gerard had been published by then. The fictitious address Dr. Watson gives for Nathan Garrideb is on Little Rider Street. Brigadier Gerard was in the Hussars. Although not little, he was a rider.
Well, that's charming. That's charming. What do you think, listeners? Does Reverend Holly make his case here? Does it stretch credulity a little bit? Where does this land in the realm of Sherlockian suppositions?
You know what happens when you stretch credulity? It will always snap back. But it's just a trifle.
It is, of course, a trifle, but there is nothing so important as trifles.
Please join us again next week for another installment of Trifles. Show notes are available on SherlockHolmesPodcast.com. Please subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and be sure to check out our longer show, I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, where we interview notable Sherlockians and share news of the Sherlockian world.
You've taken my breath away, Mr. Holmes.
We were looking for some refreshment.
Well, yeah.
And would be obliged if you could furnish it.
Would you?
We would.
You best ask woman.